From a navigation point of view, also very interesting is that you can bookmark certain nodes. So let's say that, for example, I'm very interested to always keep in mind that this node is very important for me. Like this is the actual original plate in green screen, the Pharrell going down the stairs. So let's say that I highlighted this, and now inside, as soon as I double click on this node, I can see the properties of this node. And so this is a read node. We're going to talk about the different properties of different nodes right after this class, but just wanted to give you a heads up for the bookmarking. So at any time, if you want to bookmark a specific node, being this node or, for example, another node like a transform node, I'm going to double click on the Pharrell plate and do that for you. You just go into the last tab here, which is called Node, and basically there's a button here called Bookmark. If I click on this button, now this node is bookmarked. What does this mean? This means that now if I, for example, imagine that I go all the way down to my comp here, and imagine our script is huge like this one, and you want to very quickly go into a bookmarked node. The fastest way to do it is to actually go into your menu up here on the top of Nuke, and then you go to Edit. There's a bookmark selection, and as you can see here, you have jump to bookmark node, because I've bookmarked that node. There's also a shortcut for it, which is J. So if I select jump to bookmark node, and it gives me a choice of what you want to see, and basically I want to see read 7, which is the bookmark node that we had. Now, let's imagine for a moment that I have other bookmarks. So let's say, for example, that I have this piece of footage. I'm going to double click on it, go into my nodes, and I'm going to also bookmark that. I'm actually labeling this. I'm going to label it by, inside the same tab of node, I'm actually going to label in saying this is the roto, and this is bookmarked. And now I'm going to go back to my plate, and I'm also going to write here plate on my label. So now I have a label for that, and it's bookmarked as well. And now I'm going to stop my player. I'm actually going to go down here to my final composite here. As you can see, it's processing my entire script. And now I'm going to use that shortcut that I told you about. So if I hit the letter J, opens up my bookmarks. And as you can see, I already have 2 bookmarks. Everything else, of course, is every other node that exists in Nuke. But the first 2 top are the 2 bookmark nodes. And because I labeled them, you can see that one is called plate and the other one is called roto. And so if you hit the roto, it goes directly to that node. If I hit the letter J again and I go to plate, it goes directly to that plate. So this is just a way for you to navigate even faster inside of Nuke if you have certain areas of the script that you know that are going to be very used. If you want, you can also bookmark backdrops, but we'll talk about backdrops in a second. In regards of navigation as well, there is of course also a search option inside of Nuke. So if I go in here into my search, you can see that I have select all, select similar, we have all these things including the bookmark that we talked about, but I also have search. Now search opens up a window and I can actually search something. So let's say that I want to search read 7, and so if I do read 7 inside my search and I press enter, it will show up read 7. Of course, this will only work if you actually know the name or the number of the plate. So now we kind of covered the node graph. I want to start really talking about the properties bins on the side here. So I just wanted to show you what happens when I open several nodes. So let's say that I double click on the read node of Pharrell, which goes into the top of, so I'm going to first clear all of this and I'll talk to you in a second about that. So if I double click on the read node of Pharrell, it shows up. Let's say now that I click on another node here, let's click on the roto node as well. Will show up the roto node. Let's say that we click on the actual lens grid as well. It will open up that read node. And let's say now that I go into another read node, I'm going to go into this roto read node. And one more, just for the sake of it, I'm going to double click on the curtains down here. So now as you can see, I have several read nodes on the side here. And so now you can kind of see that once we get into having too many read nodes, you kind of start having like a little bar here. And this little bar allows you to scroll down all of your nodes. Now keep in mind that only the nodes that you've double clicked will show up on my property. So this is not going to work like After Effects where you basically just open up a little toggle and every single property is open up. It will only open up the properties of whatever I clicked, because of course it would have been madness to have every single node open at the same time. Now, if you want to close a specific properties, you can basically hit the little cross that exists here. So if I click on the crosses, you can see that I can kill every single node. Now, I'm just going to go back into my nodes here. If I double click on the node again, you can also do this by clicking on the properties bin once, hitting the spacebar. You now have the properties bin in full screen. If, for example, you needed to put a big path or you needed to do certain settings, this could be a good way to have it in full screen. The other thing is that you can have a limit of how many properties you have open. So let's say that I open up a bunch of properties, and this is like a combination of rotoscopes and transforms and rotoshapes. Now, as you can see, I have a bunch of nodes going all the way down here, but you can see that there's a limit of 10. It only opens 10 of them. That's just because I have a little limit down here called 10. If I put 5 in here, it will only be able to open 5 property bins at the same time. If I put 2, it will only open 2 at the same time. And of course, if you want to close everything, you can just press this little button here. So if you press this little button here, you can kill all of them. I'm going to go back and put this back to 10, and I'm going to open up a bunch of nodes. Now, the other thing you want to know about properties is as soon as you double click on one node, it will go to the top of the properties bin. That means that if I am now talking about Pharrell's plate, if I now go into the roto plate, for example, and I double click on it, it goes to the top of the pile. If I go to the roto plate and I double click it, it goes to the top of the pile. So the order of where these nodes are depends on what is the last node that you've clicked on. Of course, by clicking on that node, it will only show up on the properties bin. It doesn't mean it will show up on the viewer. Remember, for it to show up on the viewer, you still have to select that node and press 1 for it to show up on the viewer. When you press 1, and I'm going to show you that by visualizing it, you can see that there's a huge line here, and that goes all the way to our viewer, which is floating down here. So if I press 1, you can kind of see if I click on that read node and I press 1, it connects to that one. If I select this node and I press 1, it goes to that one. So this is a visual representation of where the viewer is. Another thing that I wanted to show you in regards to the viewer, which is very handy, is this. I'm going to just copy a couple of nodes here and put them all together so I can show you. At any time, of course, you can copy paste nodes by using Control-C, Control-V. So you can just go into any node inside of Nuke, select that node, do Control-C, and then you can do Control-V, and you'll have that node. So I'm going to select these 3 nodes and click the L button to line them up. And I'm going to actually bring a new viewer into my composite. So to bring a new viewer, remember, we pressed 1 to have a viewer, but we already have one. So we can have a second viewer by going into the image menu and click viewer. In that way, we'll now have a second viewer. So this is now called viewer 2. And also you can see that there's a new tab. So we had viewer 1 here, and now we have viewer 2 on the second tab. So now I can basically look at this plate and press and basically connect to it. Now here's the thing. If you want, you can select 1 and it goes to that viewer. And if you want, you can select this plate and select 2. And you can select this plate and select 3. And select this plate and select 4. If you do that, you can now see that my viewer has 4 different connections. You can put up to 9 connections attached to one single viewer. And this is a great way for you to visualize several things. Imagine if you're with a client. So now if I just go into my viewer and click once on my viewer and press 1, 2, 3, 4, I can now see all my plates, and you can actually see the visualization changing on the viewer here. I can even play them back, and I can still jump from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And so this is a great way to show a client the result of the comp and the final composite, the original plate, and the rotoscope, and everything is still playing back, and you can just jump from one plate to the other. Now let's briefly talk about the viewer. We do have a class only about the viewer, so I'm going to just briefly talk about it. At any time, if you want, you can of course press the play button to play back the video of what's connected to it, and it starts caching into your hard drives and also into your RAM, so you can actually play it back. This yellow bar that you see on the actual viewer here, that is the RAM caching. That means it's going to fill up your RAM, and it's actually going to play back the plate in real time. The faster your hard drive is and the faster your RAM is, the faster this entire thing goes. So now it's playing back. Now it's playing back as a loop, and the reason for it to be in the loop is because there's a little button here. You can put it to repeat, bounce, stop, or continue. So of course, if I put repeat, it will loop the footage, just like we saw. If I change this to bounce, it will of course play back in forwards, like the word says, bounce. If I change this to stop, it will just play once, and that's it. So if I go back to the first position, it just plays once, and then it stops. And of course, continue will just keep playing back even if there's no frames. So imagine that you have a sequence that will continue throughout with more frames later on. Even if it goes beyond the boundaries of your script, it will continue to play. Of course, it goes without saying that repeat or loop is the best option that you have here. But we have a class only dedicated to the viewer, so we can actually talk in detail about the viewer and all of its properties, because the viewer is really its own beast. Just to wrap up this class, since I have this script open, might as well show you what's going on. Please don't be confused that you see a different layout right now. This is the layout that I usually use. I usually have a viewer this big. I have the curve editor and dope sheet back down here, and the node graph, I usually use half of the screen for the node graph. It's just easier because the node graph is a very vertical thing. Don't be confused by this. We do have a class where we'll explain how to change all of it, but I just figured to finish off this class, the best way would be to just really quickly disconstruct this shot and just show you how we did it, since we are here. So just to show you really quickly, I'm going to go into the last, I'm going to go to the first frame, or maybe I'll go to the middle. So this is the original plate that we shot, and this was shot about 4 months before we shot the orchestra. And here I have a stage of cleanup. So from here we start having a bit of a cleanup going on, and this cleanup is actually, I have to zoom in to show you. You see all these little tracking markers? These little tracking markers, little dots, are actually usable for tracking. Of course, the lens, we have to distort the lens first, because as you can see, it's very, very distorted by the lens. But all these little points, both the crosses and the little stickers, were placed by me on set so that we could have a better tracking. And this is a way of you cleaning all these little dots down. So basically have a little roto that pinpoints where the dot is, and then we have a bit of a transform. So basically the technique would be, we're going to talk more about this technique later, but the technique would be that we would move the plate to the side and then use that roto shape and do a key mix. That means that we are revealing that side plate that we use with the transform for that little dot. And we did this on all these dots, but again, don't be worried. We'll talk about this on the prep and cleanup class. So as we go down through all the key mixes, I'm going to just go down through all of them here. Once we get down here to the last key mix, you can kind of see that almost every dot is disappeared. So if I now select my plate and press 1, and I select my key mix and press 2, you can kind of see that now by pressing 1 and 2, I can actually compare the difference between no dots and also with dots. So this is one of the advantages of using node compositing. You can quickly look at certain things without looking at the whole comp. Then we have a rotopane tool here. This rotopane tool is basically removing a couple of more tracking markers and dots as well. And then we split the comp here by two things. We have the stage, which is actually 3D tracked. This means that we actually went into a 3D system of Nuke. Again, we're going to do that later. And this is a 3D representation of the track that we've done. And you can kind of see that we see here the staircase. We kind of see that this is the pillars of the sides and the light on the side. So this is actually the track that we have. If I view it through my camera's perspective, and if I play it back, you can kind of see that that's the lamp that we had on the footage, and these are the support beams, and this is the staircase down here. So this is the 3D track, which was also done in Nuke, and which we will talk about later on in our class. Once that is done, we've used the 3D track to do a stabilization. So now, that means that using this node here, which we'll talk about that later, we've actually completely stabilized Pharrell. And the reason we stabilized Pharrell is because we need to have Pharrell replaced in position on the other plate. So if you just wait a few frames, you'll see that it's playing back as a stabilized plate. So as you can see now, the 3D track that we've done has helped to keep Pharrell exactly on the same place at all times. And that will be much easier for us to now position him into the other plate, making really what we call a poor man's motion control. Because if we had motion control, we could have filmed twice. But because we don't have motion control, we have to do a poor man's version. Now that this is stabilized, let's talk about the rest of the shot. So we have several parts here. Let's talk about the background itself, which is, first of all, let's talk about the curtains, actually. So these are the curtains that we shot on set. We, of course, did a bunch of color corrector to match the original curtains that we had on the actual orchestra. From here, this is, of course, doesn't need to be tracked because this is a static shot. From here, we basically did a cut of the scene. So I'm going to just show you really quickly here. So we have the stabilization. As you can see here, this is a tracker. This tracker is linked to a track that we did of the original plate. So if I go into my plate here, this is my background. So this is the plate we shot on the orchestra 4 months later. And what we did was we 2D tracked this background with these tracking markers. And then, of course, that helped us to put the curtain there and also to put Pharrell. You might be asking, why couldn't we just put the curtain for real there? Well, Britain is very well known by its health and safety. And healthy safety regulations did not allow us to put the curtain in here because this was filmed on a place called Halipali, which is Alexander Palace, which is pretty much almost, crumbling. It's really old. And beyond where the orchestra is, they deemed that part not safe enough for us to actually put the curtain. So we had to just put a green screen instead of a curtain because the curtain would go beyond the threshold of safety that they allowed us. So again, here and is an example of putting a visual effects because of safety and not because of look or because of a choice on the script. There is a lot of times the visual effects are done because of safety. So we've tracked that, and then of course that track got applied into our curtain. So now if I play back this, you'll see that my curtain is now playing back at the same scaling and tracking as my background. As you can see here, it's moving just like my background. Now from there, I also have a key mix here with an actual circle. So this circle is actually being done by a spotlight. What we did was we did a roto shape, which is like that. We then blurred it and transformed it and moved it. We then did we picked up the alpha channel of Pharrell and cut and displace against the actual curtain so that we could have, now the displacement here does this, making the curtain and the shadow actually get rounded around the shapes of the curtain. So you see here, the displacement node is doing this. It's curving the shadow, making it look like it's actually affecting the actual shadow in the curtain itself. And so this is the original light source that we had in Pharrell. Now, if I go back into my main comp, you can now see that I've started with my curtain. And now I'm going to start putting in Pharrell and the background. So now the background was done like this. We have this, of course. We then did a Luma key. We then did some roto as well, and we pre-multiplied. Now, of course, keep in mind the rotoscope it was already made in India, so we sent this rotoscope to a company called Trace, and this is the final rotoscope. We have the masks for the actual people on the orchestra, and we have the mask for the actual floor and lamps as well. If you combine them both, you get a mask like this. So this rotoscope was made by another company. It was outsourced. And then this is the rotoscope that we use to cut this out. Now, there's a lot of color correction, as you can see here. So if I disable all this color correction, these are all color correctors to basically make sure that this actually looks like the same as the Pharrell plate. And then we start merging them both. So you see, was just the curtain with the Pharrell lamp. Then we put in the actual orchestra. Then we place Pharrell into the shot. And then we just have a couple of glints and a couple of other things like some dust and some atmospherics. And that was it. That was the final shot. Of course, there's a lot more to it, especially for the tracking area here that we have. But I'm going to leave that to later on, because when we have the tracking class, I want to show you this more in detail so that you can kind of see how it's done. But this is the final shot. As you can see, Pharrell looks like he's actually going down the stairs in the other plate that we've made. And keep in mind, these two boat plates were not done in motion control. They were done by hand. We basically just tried to replicate the camera move 2 times, and it was like 4 months apart. One of them actually was shot inside a little small studio of music in central London. And that was, of course, a very tight place where we had like a crane that could actually move down the staircase. And the other plate was actually shot 4 months later at Alexandra Palace in the north of London. I would like to share with you a really funny website. This website is called Scripts of Another Dimension. It's actually, the address is scriptsofanotherdimension.tumblr.com if you want to check it out. I can leave the link in the forums as well. And it's basically a collection of people just posting the most horrible scripts they can find. As you can see, this is a stereoscopic script and it's really messy. And if you go through, it gets even worse, as you can see on this one here, which you can't even understand what's going on. It gets even worse. So if you thought that my scripts were complicated, imagine trying to open a script like this. And this, of course, goes beyond Nuke. It goes into Maya, Flame. There's people actually showcasing, this is Flame, for example. But most of the time it's Nuke, and that's where it had its origin. I really like this one. It's so colorful. But some of them are less complicated than others. As you can see, I'm going to go into the last page because those are the ones that exist when we were still at the mill. So this actually was the first one that was published in 2012 when we were still at the mill. And I actually don't know which job it is. And imagine trying to work out your way through all these grade notes. Especially there's like pipes that don't even go anywhere. Becomes so complicated. So this is yet another reason for you to kind of always keep in mind trying to keep your scripts organized. Now this script, for example, is also pretty messy, but kind of. This is actually from a Rainbow Six cinematic that we were working on. These ones were a bit less complicated, but just imagine trying to figure out the inputs in this area here. But my favorite is this one. This is actually a node that actually exists in Nuke, which is called the mind read. And this was, of course, a joke. Basically, the plate comes in, we do a mind read, and the composite is done. Just like Cameron wrote here, this script is called Home in Time. So that, we basically read the mind of our clients. I hope you've enjoyed this class. I know it's always a bit tricky to understand software from the ground up. It's always looks very overwhelming. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Ricardo, or Bjorn on the forums or in messages or in Discord. And just keep the questions coming. Hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next class.